Food was so good, he's still picking it out of his teeth.
Mm-hmm.
So, I wrote down my scripture reference for tonight. Just kidding. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8, it says, "Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him, steadfast in the faith, knowing that the same sufferings are experienced by your brotherhood in the world." The second part, he's saying, stand firm in your faith, knowing you're not the only ones dealing with this. And this, again, is your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And what do you do about it? Be sober and be vigilant. Vigilant is one of those words that means a lot of things at one time. But vigilant means being firm, standing strong, being faithful, being consistent, being aggressive, being alert. Sounds very Army-esque, doesn't it? That's because it is. A couple nights ago, my daughter went to the midnight premiere of the new Batman movie. Boy, this story could have ended a lot different, couldn't it? I just called her because I was curious and I never asked this question. When did you find out what happened in Colorado? Because if the answer had been during the movie, well, I don't want to jump ahead, but she said she actually turned her phone off at the movie. That's the first, but it was Batman. So she and her friends turned off their phones, so they heard about it when they turned their phones back on and saw all the messages coming from people on Facebook. Because of course the last thing they announced when they went to the movies the other night was at Batman. Now there's a dozen other people that did the same thing. Then that was their last communication in their entire life. And I said to her, well, good thing you found out after. She goes, oh, trust me, if I had heard about it during the movie, we would have gotten up and left. And I'm glad that I have post 9/11 children that understand that if one person can do it, there could be a group of them doing it all over the country at the same time. That it may not be isolated. And I hate to say that, but that was the reality, is that, you know, and that's what kept running through my head over and over and over again after this happened is, you know, what would life be like today? And I just lost my cat, and that was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through. And in comparison to what I just said sounds so, well, lame. You know, people say, you know, pets are like children. No, pets are like pets. Sometimes that's better than children. I've said that before. But it's complicated. But I do know the difference between a cat I've known as long as my youngest child. I do know the difference. It was weird just to watch the animal die in front of that child, you know, and realize they're basically the same age. That was weird. But I know the difference. I know that cats and dogs, and everyone who knows me knows what I think of them, are here to comfort us in this life, much like angels, and to teach us by their mere existence how to be more humane, how to be better people. But our children are born with calls on their life that go far beyond that of the animal. So when my mother died, and someone said to me, "Oh, I know exactly how you feel, my dog died," I was like, well, that's fascinating. Because when you lose a human, it's complicated. When you lose an animal, it's very simple. It's awful. But it is just point A to point B. You knew it was coming. You knew it when you got the animal. One day this is going to happen, and you've got to live through it. And you've got to find a place for them in your memory mantle. But with a human, it's so much more complicated, because as much as my amazing cat has touched countless lives, it's nothing compared to that which my daughter has already touched and will touch, and she and her friends, if God forbid this happened in Phoenix and not in Colorado. And no, it did not put anything into perspective, and it still sucked losing a cat. Because let's be fair, my kid's safe and my cat wasn't. But the thing that I really want to talk about tonight is the devil, Satan, Lucifer, the father of lies. And Peter admonishes the saints that the devil is a lion looking for whom he can devour. And it seems so point A to point B to say that this person who walked into a movie theater and shot people, whose name I have made it my life's work never to know, for the record. If I'm not going to know the names of the 12 victims, I'm sure as hell not learning this guy's name. He's just a puppet. And it's so easy, it seems so easy, like, you know, I started this sermon early thinking I'd go long, and it's so pointless because it should be point A to point B. The devil made him do it. Close your Bibles, let's sing. But it's so much more complicated than that. It isn't more complicated than that. But we, meaning everyone but me, that I've talked to about this, make it more complicated than that. It's not complicated for me. It's not complicated. It's devastating, and he matters, and the people who died matter, and the people that survived matter. Everybody in this story matters just as much. But it's not complicated what happened. However, every single person I have talked to about what happened in Colorado, and for the record, that wasn't me trying to have these conversations. The only conversations I instigated about it had to do with my kids. I did bring it up to my kids and say, do you know about this? You know, and give them a place to talk about. But everyone else, I just kind of waited, and it came up anyways. But every single conversation I've had, someone said, I guess to me, because I was one hearing it, was, why did he do it? I got an in with this guy. You know, what made him do it? Or what was he thinking? Or why does someone do that? And over and over and over and over again. And I've been here before. In 30 years of ministry, I've been here so many times. And I always like to say the real question is, why does someone else not do it? Why does someone else not do it? See, I've said all along that it's God's mercy to the people I went to high school with that Columbine didn't happen when I was a teenager. You know what I'm saying? Because we owned a gun. If I had seen that on the news, I go, well, there you go. I've been praying for an answer for what it's like to be me in school, and you just gave me the answer. And I'm serious, and I'm not glorifying that at all, because it's rarely the bullied kids that actually retaliate. It's a totally different type of animal that goes and does massive violence. It's only in the movies that a bullied kid does it. You know, in the movie Carrie, the bullied kid, you know, killed everybody at the prom, and the audience rooted her on because we saw how bad she had been treated. But in real life, that's rarely the case. There's rarely a connection between the perpetrator and the victim. That is because it has nothing to do with either. It has nothing to do with either. It has nothing to do with the person who did it, and it has nothing to do with the people that it happened to. And I mentioned 9/11 and in this, in saying that post 9/11 thinking is sort of like post John F. Kennedy assassination thinking, that that America looks at life different after an event like that. And someone like me would say, well, gosh, if one person was in one theater, what if a group of them did it in several theaters? In the middle of the night, if I were watching Batman and I knew that happened, I'd be like, we need to get out of here. We need to get out of here. To be honest, I'm a little surprised theaters didn't stop the showing of the film. I'm surprised at least one didn't do that. That someone didn't get wind of this happening in one place and say, you know what, in case this is going to happen elsewhere, let's just stop the movie. But I know what people are thinking. Has something to do with money, and I think this was all very complicated. I think it was all very complicated how this went down. But what I want to talk about is that roaring lion seeking whom he can devour, Satan. I want to talk about the devil. I want to talk about the devil tonight. Because I want to answer the question is, how does this happen? What happened to the guy whose name I will never learn? The guy whose name I will never learn. And I'm doing that in solidarity for the families of the victims who are at home going, why is this guy getting all this attention? He's all over the news. I tell people, that's, the fact that you're talking about him says why he did it. But it's not really true, but it probably is an element of it, at least in his mind. In his mind, he thinks he's famous now. And he is. He's incredibly famous. He's the most famous person of the moment. Even the president knows who he is. My fear when I hear God's people say, why did he do it? Why did he do it? My fear is that they don't recognize their adversary. They don't know how Satan works. So tonight I want to talk about it. I want to talk about that roaring lion who seeks to devour anyone he can. If you ever go see a hypnotist in public, in a showroom, or even magicians are like this, they are trained to know who is most susceptible to their magic. They know the kind of person they want to select to use as their assistant or their victim of their trick, or the star of their trick, which is, depending on how you look at it, the person who gets selected by a magician, for the magician to read their mind, or for someone who is selected to be hypnotized. They think, I'm going to be the star now. I'm going to be the star. Everyone in here is going to remember me. And they want someone like that. They want someone who's excited. I know someone who was levitated by Penn and Teller. And they know how it's done. But they're never going to tell anyone because they were the right person to be picked. What they say is that I know that something lifted me up, but it's very hard for me to figure out what it was. But something lifted me up, for sure. There was an apparatus. And the reason why this is being talked about is because Teller did the effects for the live stage version of The Exorcist, and there's a levitation in it. So everyone's talking about how that was done, and nobody knows exactly how it was done, but everyone's talking about it. And but they select people that will be more moldable to the trick. Magicians do this and hypnotists do this. Hypnotists have to find the person in the room that is most likely to go along with being hypnotized, whether they really are or not. And what a hypnotist does in a mass, when they work in mass in a showroom, is they say, well, before we start, I want to hypnotize the whole audience. And so they do all the things, to hypnotize an audience. And then they say, now that you're under my command, I want you to do this, and I want you to do this, and I want you to do this. You know, your seat's getting really hot and the room's getting really cold and you just heard a funny joke. And they're looking around the room trying to pick the person that's most likely to last as long as they need them to last in the show. I've said this before, I know someone that always got hypnotized and they love to be the center of attention. I'm sure it was a coincidence. I think hypnotism is bogus and satanic, so it's a perfect example. It's a perfect example because society is routinely hypnotized by Satan. Routinely. That there's always a plan to hypnotize God's people. All people. There's always a plan. There's always a, all right, let's get everybody worked up about this. Let's get everybody worked up about this. Let's get people really worked up about this. Who wants me to be controversial in my example of let's get really worked up about something so that we can hypnotize an entire group of people into believing one thing so Satan can move in and do something really bad? Just all I need is a little finger wiggling at me to egg me on right now because I really want to use something really controversial. Come on, is there any fingers? Come on, guys. I see there. I knew you would. Pit bulls. I love pit bulls. You know why? Because if you live in Colorado and you have a pit bull, the pit bull Nazis come and they take them from your home and they slaughter them in pit bull concentration camps. Isn't that neat? Isn't that neat? Isn't that horrible? Anyone met my pit bull? Can you imagine if they made this rule, made this the law in Arizona, and someone came to my door, barged down my door and said, "We're here for the pit bull"? I mean, seriously. Can you imagine living in a state, and I don't mean the state of Colorado, but I mean a police state like that, living in an environment of that nature? Can you imagine? Seriously. Seriously. That someone can come and take your animal away because of their breed. It's outrageous. It's unbelievably outrageous. Unbelievably outrageous. And we as a nation judge China for having laws about how many kids you can have and having state-sanctioned abortions and state-sanctioned taxes and fines for having more than the limit of children you're allowed to have. But we as a nation look the other way when one state can decide what you can have and not have based on mass hypnosis. Statistically, the most animal crimes, the most crimes that any breed of dog has committed in the past decade is a Labrador Retriever. I happen to have one of those too. You could light fireworks in her ears and she wouldn't even look at you funny. And this is what labs are like. Everybody knows this. Labs just don't get mad. And they sure as hell don't attack people. Pit bulls do. We're hypnotized. We're hypnotized. Now, I was attacked by a dog as a kid. Lived next door to me. It was a black lab. Nobody even knows anything. You know, you tell people that story and they go, "Oh, well, I had a friend who was killed by a pit bull." They always go to the pit bull. The pit bull is so dramatic. And I am not downplaying the possibility of violence with a pit bull. But I posted that amazing video of that Doberman playing with that kitten. And Dobermans used to get this. And Rottweilers used to get this. You know, and they all fall in the same category. Big scary dogs with big teeth. That's a fact. That's a fact. So do Chihuahuas. But let's hypnotize them to the degree that we're not even going to allow for there to be an opportunity for an animal to do this in our state. Let's just exterminate these dogs. It's interesting. I welcome the reaction I'm about to get from one person in the world for what I'm about to say. Just remember, the pen is mightier than the sword. So just write it, no swords. But as a Jew who became a Christian, I've been asked 1,000,000 times, why didn't God do anything about the Nazis? But if I said, that's funny, because the other night, what if God did do something about the Nazis? You have a state that allows the extermination of a helpless breed just because they're born that way. Oh my gosh, I could just go here, but I won't. And you have an event that has the entire world going, if there was a God, this wouldn't have happened. And I'm going to say, as much as it pains me to have to point this fact out, it's because there's a God that this happened. Now, if anyone's going to turn around and say, Paisley Yankolovich just said that the reason why a shooter showed up in the Batman movie in Colorado is because Colorado kills pit bulls, I might have kind of hinted at that, but I didn't exactly say that. But you guys don't mind, by the way, you guys don't mind Christian leaders blaming 9/11 on the queers, but I can't blame a shooting in a movie theater on the slaughter of innocent dogs. But here's what I need to say. It is part of the fallen world that we live in, that we live and die. That is a fact. Not God's will. God never intended anything to die. It was not my cat's time to go. It's just the way it is. So just because it was the time he went, it wasn't ordained in heaven that the greatest creature I've ever known was going to die. God was just as heartbroken as I was over that. My Bible says that. My Bible says that he is aware of every single animal and what happens to them. So it is not, there's no stretch of my imagination that killing animals that aren't sick, killing animals that haven't hurt anyone, killing animals that are in safe homes is slaughter. They're not even eating the pit bulls in Colorado. In my backyard, there's probably a right when I said that. What? They're doing what? You know what I'm saying? They're not even eating them. They're just killing them. I am convinced that there's only so much God takes, and eventually he allows judgment to happen. Is that what I'm going to say happened in Colorado? No, that would be mean. However, could that be the reason that God allowed what happened in Colorado? Absolutely. Wait a minute. Isn't that sort of the same thing? It's so close, even I can't tell, but I know it's different. I know it's different, and I'm going to say this. It is part of life for everything to live and die. And not God's will, but the life we live. Nod that I've made that point enough that I didn't say it was okay for people to die. Do we get that? Okay, just make sure. But in order for someone to die in an airplane that's crashed in the World Trade Center, that has to go through a different line of authority. Okay. Living and dying will happen. Being murdered, being mass murdered, being incarcerated in a concentration camp and exterminated, or being on the Titanic. These events, and the other night in Colorado, fall under the category of this is not part of life. That's why people are outraged. See, if you have a heart attack, people go, that sucks. Even when people have heart attacks when they're really young. We go, guy, they were so young. But we go back and watch reality television. But we talk about these events because they don't fit in with what deep down inside we know is the new natural order state of unnatural order that we live in. But this crosses a particular type of line that we have to understand falls under a different jurisdiction. Now, I have to admit, this is probably the most interesting thing I've ever talked about. So I'm like waiting to see how I pull this puppy off. But I really get this. So this is why people come to me and say, why did he do this? Well, I know. I don't know why. People ask me, well, why did he do it? Well, why did he? I just think it's funny. Well, it's funny because he and I had lunch at Denny's that morning, and he said, I'm going to do this, and it's because of this. I've listened to Marilyn Manson, and I wear black, and, you know. Can I just say something about the Batman movies? I have a Batman tattoo, so I'm a huge Batman fan, all right? And I do want to see this movie. It's almost 3 hours long, so gosh, will someone who's seen it tell me when it's okay to get up and go pee? But I've loved this trilogy, you know, this new Batman. I really have. I love the TV show, and I love the comic books, and I even have some of the original collectible comics, and I loved the Tim Burton Batman movie. The first one, the second one were brilliant. Those two movies are my favorites. Batman is darker than anything I have up on my walls, anything I listen to, anything I wear, anything I do. The Batman stuff is darker and creepier than Marilyn Manson. And the whole world eats this up and judges people who wear black and listen to goth music. Did you know that Batman takes place in Gotham? I mean, how come nobody notices this? How come? I mean, I remember when someone pointed out to me that, you know, if you watch the TV show Batman, you know, the really campy one, that Batman and Robin kind of come off as boyfriends. And I was like, this is funny. You know, even one of the Batman movies, I don't know, what was it called? Batman Forever, that's right, because Robin decides Batman Forever at the end of the movie. And they even run off together in that movie, and nobody noticed how gay that movie was. How come nobody notices how dark and creepy this is? Does it take, obviously I don't judge that, but if someone came with guns to a Marilyn Manson concert and did this, the whole world would be talking different about it. Well, it was a Marilyn Manson concert. Yeah, go see the new Batman movie. I'm going to guess that 99% of it's in the dark. 3 hours of watching night. That's what I'm guessing. And I'll dig it. I mean, I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining. I just don't see much difference between, certainly no difference between Alice Cooper and Batman. You know, it's just a different genre, a different medium for the same type of stuff. And yet, again, nobody realizes this is a really dark thing to be doing in the middle of the night. I don't know, I just think it's really funny. If I went to a Marilyn Manson concert at midnight and this happened, there'd be so much, there'd be a cloak of judgment. Hypnotized. That's what I see it as. Because you don't have to agree with me that Batman can cause as much damage to your preschoolers as listening to Marilyn Manson, because that's probably not the case I presented. But I'm saying, let's be fair. If we're going to say something's dark, let's say what dark is. And Marilyn Manson is dark. I'm dark. Batman's dark. I just happen to find Batman to be a lot darker than the kitchen. That's the honest truth. That's the honest truth, you know? But it's all shades of dark, right? I mean, I respect that. It's all shades of dark. But we're hypnotized. One thing is this, and another thing is this. This is how Satan works. If he could segregate society to do this, he can get kids who listen to Marilyn Manson to go and kill people in Columbine, and then blame it, and have Christians blame it on Marilyn Manson, and have non-Christians even blame it on Marilyn Manson. Because Marilyn Manson is so powerful. I mean, seriously. Marilyn Manson was what? And I love the guy, but he was what? Famous for a minute and a half? Seriously. Seriously. I mean, I buy all of Marilyn Manson.